It's my pleasure to welcome you to our first seminar. Apologies if there are any technical glitches along the way, but hopefully you can all hear me. What I would like to do is to try and answer the question, what is the SME instrument and is it suitable for my business? But online we have people who have never perhaps heard of it, people who know about it. So all I can do is start with basics, and if you already know this information, it may be a refresher or an expansion of your knowledge, but bear with us. Sorry, we're just lining up the presentation. I did say there could be technical problems. As an engineer, I'm well used to this, but not the electronic ones. Okay, so who am I? As I've said, background in production engineering. I've worked on SME programs for many years and with the European Commission for over 30 years. I have also worked in Turkey extensively on two previous projects on Horizon. And in the last project, Yasmin and I visited 100 SMEs, and we had a unique insight really into the businesses, the issues that you face, and the appropriateness of Horizon. I'm responsible for the SME programs under the current project. So in the webinar, I would like to cover what is the European Commission? Some people may not know. What is Horizon 2020 and the SME instrument? And then go into more detail about who it's aimed at, what's expected of you as a business, what do evaluators look for. As Yasmin said, this is the first of 9 webinars, so we'll be going into more detail on many of these aspects on later events. So, what is the EC? There's often confusion between EU and EC. EU is the European Union. It's a union of 28 member states, or perhaps 27.5 member states at the moment. Of course, is expanding. Over the last 40 years, it went from 6 to 28. But it is the union of countries, and it's governed by the Council of chief ministers, prime ministers from each of those countries. Naturally, as they contribute to the budget, they control the European Commission. So the European Commission is the executive body for the European Union, and this is why often on television you see that there are 2 presidents. One is president of the European Union, and one is president of the European Commission, the executive body. Think of it as a board of directors, really, of the European Commission. Accession states, these are countries which are, who want to become members of the European Union, but have to go through quite extensive changes, often resulting in national legislation and changes in the way they govern. At the moment, there are 5, and Turkey is one of those 5. So Turkey can participate in programs, and indeed it contributes funding towards those programs as it contributes towards the Horizon 2020 program. So when we talk of Horizon 2020, the European Union, the EC, we're also talking about Turkish taxpayers' money being used on the project as well as European Union. So let's look now at the SME instrument. First of all, what is an SME? Small and medium enterprise is the title. It's defined as having 1 to 250 employees, Now, this means that roughly 95% of all companies across the European Union, and the same applies for Turkey, roughly 95% are SMEs. They also contribute up to about 50% of all jobs and about the same share in exports. So you can see how important SMEs are to all of the economies. And this is why there's such a concentration on SMEs when it comes to assistance. There is, of course, help available for larger enterprises, but nothing like as much as for SMEs. So the limit is 250 employees, and they must have less than 50 million euros turnover. Now, I know that seems a ridiculous sum for an SME, but you can have a large automated steelworks with a turnover of more than 50 million that has just a few employees because it's fully automated. So that's a control really to limit the size of the financial aspect of a business as well as the number of employees. But usually we're thinking in terms of the number of employees. Horizon 2020, this looks like an awfully complicated slide, so I'll take you through it. There are three so-called pillars of Horizon 2020. Incidentally, Horizon 2020 is the 8th framework program. You may hear the term framework program. This is the structure by which the European Commission handles the funding, which has been agreed by the European Union. Each of these framework programs runs for between 5 and 7 years, and we're now on the 8th, and the 9th will begin next year. So you're following a well-established path in terms of the coverage of the framework program. So looking at Horizon 2020, the three pillars are excellent science, industrial leadership, and social challenges. Now, all of the member states come together. They look at the issues which are going to, they think, are going to affect them and their economies and their people over the next 5 or so years. They come up with a work plan under these headings, which they've previously agreed, and they then call for work to be done in the form of calls for proposals, calls for tenders, for work to be done to satisfy what they see as the future demands of their companies and their people. So, the three pillars: excellent science, that's really for funding far-sighted research in universities and research institutions. So you see in there frontier research funded by the European Research Council, 13 billion euros over the 6 years of the project. Marie, excuse my pronunciation to anyone Polish, Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. These are actions which help academics really to transfer knowledge, particularly students and PhD level people. Future and emerging technologies, obviously looking again far-sightedly, and world-class infrastructure to support R&D. Bearing in mind that not all member states are at the same level of economic development, so some states need more assistance than others to come up to a European norm. I'll go to the third one now, the societal challenges. This is covering all the issues really to do with the health, well-being, and social interaction of the European people. And there are, of course, roughly 360 million people in Europe, roughly the same as the United States. So it's a big market, it's multicultural, very diverse, and again, is at different levels of development. So the funding here helps on issues like improving health and well-being, food security, sustainable energy, climate change, managing the oceans, and security with increasing problems on inter-country securities. So a wide range there. Important to remember that if you're bidding on some of the larger European projects, the project may be a technical project, but it could be excused perhaps as a societal project. So if it's an ICT project, information and communication technologies, it may be seen as a technical project, but it may be used in the health service. So you can have different approaches to funding through the program. In that particular case, you may have a lot of competition for a technical proposal, but it could be that there will be a lot less on the societal challenges, so your proposal may get through, and of course, vice versa, if you see a health issue as a technical problem. So it can be covered in many ways. So back to the center one now, the industrial leadership. This is really to do with improving the competitiveness of industry. So access to finances in their leadership in enabling and industrial technologies covers a huge range of things. And you'll see there it's one of the largest budgets in terms of improving efficiency. At the bottom there, there's funding for spreading excellence and for science and society. But you see in the center of the blue one, the industrial leadership, that SME Innovation Instrument sits there with a budget of 3 billion. Now, the overall budget for Horizon 2020 over the 6 years is 77 billion. So although this is a small part of the overall budget, it's still a large budget to spend on the SME projects that we shall be looking at. Why is it there? You may already have seen this so-called Valley of Death. You have research funding on the left, which would of course come from Pillar 1, a lot of research funding going into universities, and traditionally on the framework programs, they have tended to fund basic science more than applied science. It was only during the recession in 2008-9 that member states started asking, we put all this money into research, what is the economic benefit in terms of exports and jobs? So the accent on Horizon 2020 and increasingly on the next framework program will focus on the return on science and innovation rather than the investment in the blue skies research. So on the left we have research, and of course on the right, when you have a product which can be commercialized, there's often a queue of people waiting to fund. It could be a larger company buying your company or your products. It could be venture capitalists. It could be business angels. But in the middle, there's this gap of transferring from a research project, a prototype, into a product that can be commercialized. And this is where the funding is applied for the SME instrument to get people through the gap in the middle. A very complex slide, but I will take you through it. The SME instrument has 3 phases, and the whole idea is to transform disruptive ideas, you see at the top there, into concrete, innovative solutions with a European and global impact. SMEs are recommended to apply for phase 1, but they may also apply directly for phase 2. We'll forget phase 3 for the moment. When we're talking to SMEs, we try to recommend them to go for phase 1 because that lines you up well for phase 2. And of course, it means that you get more funding, and probably funding is easier through phase 1 than from phase 2. So let's look at phase 1. That's about working on the concept and feasibility assessment to take the idea through to a more concrete prototype. It's really at the stage where you have a viable prototype, think of it that way. So an initial business proposal is drafted. This goes before a panel. We'll look at that in a second. And up to £50,000 can be awarded for this phase. So really, it's helping you to do a market assessment, look at competition, look to see whether the product really is innovative, although, of course, you will have gone through this sort of judgment in being awarded the funding. Phase 2 then is to take that product, service and so forth through to a commercializable product. This is the filling the gap, the second part of filling the gap in the Valley of Death model. So that's likely to span 1 to 2 years. It helps the SME to further develop the proposal through innovation activities and draft a more developed business plan. And this is quite a sizable grant from the Commission. I should say both of these are grants, 0.5 million to 2.5 million, and that is up to 70% of the funding. Phase 3 is really assistance in various ways, through mentoring to help you get through to commercialization. There is also access to risk finance, access to a risk of financial supporters, if you like. So it's a supporting phase, really. You can see that all of this is to take brilliantly clever, proven ideas through to the point where it gets into market and begins to contribute to the economy of the member states and the accession countries, of course, within that. There's a lot of talk, if you look at the grey box at the bottom, I'll go into this in more detail, a lot of talk about technology readiness level. This is a grading system that the European Commission use when considering these projects. All of these applications are, of course, heavily contested. They're really competitive. And you're very lucky if you do get financial support. But it's not just about finance. It's about considering your product, your company, whether it is truly innovative, developing a business plan, and even training, if you like, in writing a proposal or series of proposals. So it's actually also educational, and many companies find the process to be very useful in terms of making their business more viable or more efficient. The evaluation process used to be the pale boxes you see there. You submit a proposal, it goes out to remote evaluators. The Commission only evaluates it in terms of, is all the information there? Does it have all the sections and signatures? It goes out to remote evaluators who give their view on the product, service, and how viable it is. And I'll talk about that more later. They rank the proposals, and the Commission, with its limited budget, it's always heavily oversubscribed. The Commission then used to give a grant. But now there's an interview process to interview the shortlist and make a final decision on who the winners are. Again, I'll cover that in a second. Evaluation process is portrayed there. The jury, it's terrible to use jury, the panel of reviewers are briefed. They interview the applicants for roughly 30 minutes. They debrief to discuss their views for 15 minutes. And then at the end of the exercise, the agreement is made on which projects. Now, there are Turkish representatives, of course, on these panels of judges. And in fact, Yasmin does do some of this evaluation. So Turkey is included in that process. Just a few statistics, the SME Instrument in numbers, roughly 3,000 companies. It's climbing all the time, of course, with a spend of 1.3 billion. So it's roughly halfway through its budget spend. And of course, there are a lot of projects in progress, which will take that up to the 3 billion by the end of Horizon. And there's roughly 5 to 8% success rate. Now, that seems low. In comparison with other national programs, it isn't. It's not too bad a figure. But it doesn't really matter. You shouldn't really think about this as an SME. You should be looking to win funding yourself, and what others are doing or how successful or not is not that relevant. It should focus on what you're doing and how you see your product or service. I mentioned Horizon 2010 will run up to the end of December next year, and it will be followed by Horizon Europe. That's still being formulated, and that will run for 6 years to 2027. It will have very similar content, but no doubt there will be changes within the model to cater for a different perspective taken by the European member states on what will be important for their countries over the next 6 years or so. Looking at budgets, 77 billion went into Horizon 2020, and already 94 billion is earmarked for Horizon Europe. So a much bigger budget. Every time the framework program comes up, there's an increase in budget. And I think this registers the importance of the SME system and structure to SME system and structure to Europe and its future survival in economic terms. Oh, I had a lot. We have questions coming in. Any questions so far? And you can raise questions using your Zoom. Just looking at some of them, already lots of questions. There's one here. There are 3 pillars of support. As SMEs, can we get anything from the other 2 pillars? The answer is yes, you can get help on collaborative research projects, but they are far more complex than the SME Instrument ones. The collaborative ones involve working in partnership with organizations and companies in other parts of Europe. Cross-border cooperation is very important. There's a role for the leader of those projects to make sure the work plan is followed and to ensure that the budget is controlled. So you need to work with a bigger partner. It's usually a much larger budget, and the SMEs are very welcome in those projects. There are lots and lots and lots of connections on the Horizon website and on the European website, Europa, which is an excellent website. It's been very well developed, whereby you can find partners. You can go to partnering events, but it tends to be for projects which are not as close to market as the SME Instrument. And the big difference with SME Instrument is that it goes to individual companies rather into collaborative research. In collaborative research, of course, you have to share the results with the other collaborators, so you don't have any unique control over any intellectual property. Any more? We'll take a couple and then carry on with the presentation. Do SMEs have to win phase 1 funding to go for phase 2? No, they don't. I mentioned this earlier. You can go directly for phase 2, but you're well advised to go for phase 1 first, so that you have formulated your ideas, your strategy, your business plan, because it puts you in a much better situation to go for phase 2. How do I assess my technology readiness level? We'll go to that in a moment. Is any cash available from TÜBİTAK? I have my colleagues here from TÜBİTAK. Can we switch over to them? There's a nod from my colleagues rather than interrupt the flow. There is support from. There is support. Oh, we have a star guest coming in. So there we are. Hi. so Shema, can TÜBİTAK help people to get? Huh? Oh, right. Okay. We're waiting for a connection. Let's say bear with us with the technology.
Can I get this again?
Yeah, the question is there any assistance from TÜBİTAK to help SMEs get the SME Instrument support?
Yeah, of course. We have multiple supports as financial, and also we are here to help SMEs for all the process, because our duty is to get you to know about the program, and also make your proposals much more successful, you know. So firstly, we get all kinds of questions and about anything they are, you know, they need help in the process. We try to help them. Secondly, as TÜBİTAK, we have lots of financial supports. You may find them in our website in details, but firstly, especially for SME Instrument program, we have this project writing support, and secondly, we have some we have organization support, so on. Maybe you should visit our website to know them in details. But besides the financial support, you can always come to us and ask about anything as you propose and while you are running your project.
I hope that answers the question. We do have some more questions coming through, so perhaps take another 2 or 3 and then we'll carry on. So can we switch back to, well, perhaps Shami can answer them if you've got the list there. Okay.
First stage 1, how many succeeded? These success rates are must.
Sorry, could you give the question so that everybody understands it?
How many Turkish companies applied in the past for the first stage and how many succeeded? These questions, I don't know why, are the most asked ones. So I cannot exactly remember how many companies were applied, but we have 28 projects were successful in phase 1. I can say that. I have joined on a conference previously about H2020. The speaker has insisted on applying for H2020 with a partner. What do you say about it? It actually depends on what program you will apply. For SME Instrument, basically this is for only one SME. Of course, if you need in your project, it depends on your project's concept. If you need another partner, it must be also an SME. But for SME Instrument, there is no obligation like applying with a partner. But with other programs in H2020, you must apply with partners. This is the obligation, so it depends on the program you are applying. Thank you, Philip, for intro. Got a quick question. Have heard that SME Instrument phase 1 will not take application after May. Is that so? Yeah, it's a good question. It actually not now they are definitely decided on that. After May, there will be one more cutoff date, then it will be finished. They will continue with phase 2 from now on. And there will be some other also instruments, funding instruments, such as equity funds and loaning. But we will be hearing about all of them soon, and we will make news about them soon when they will be published. So yes, that's true. Not May. After May, there will be one more cutoff, then it will be finished.
Okay. Thanks for that. We should be taking more questions later on, so let's go back to the presentation. So, who is the SME instrument aimed at? There's lots of pointers in the text surrounding the SME instrument. This is about, ideally, world-beating innovations, new innovations, more of that in a second. So satisfying revolutionary business ideas, companies with a business plan for rolling out a marketable innovation solution, market creating innovations, breakthrough products, services, processes, or business models, opening up new markets with the potential for rapid growth at both European and global levels, clearly satisfying market needs, has a wow factor. That's an interesting one. What's a wow factor? Now, that may seem very focused, but of course, it's focused on the very point in the so-called valley of death where help is needed. You may have a brilliant new product, brilliant new innovation, but it's not at the point where it can attract external funding. So this is why it comes in. Okay, so just looking at 6 main criteria, the product, service, or business model is, and there's a list there: close to market, cross-border, high growth, disruptive, scalable, and at the prototype stage. Now, I'm going to look at each of those in turn. So let's take close to market and at the prototype stage together, and the European Commission defines that at technology readiness level 6 or above. What does that mean? Well, there's the string of various levels. You see it goes from 0 to 9, 0 being the idea and 9 being the full commercial application. So that's where we're interested, from a prototype tested in intended environmental, tested in the intended environment and close to expected performance. It's demonstrable, it's been demonstrated. It may be the first of a kind of commercial system or the full commercial application. I think the important thing there is to note what it is not intended for. So it's not intended for brilliant new ideas that are not proven. It's not intended for basic research, because if you remember, that was covered under Pillar 1. Technology formulation, concept and application, again, that's probably the development part of R&D, research development. If it needs validation, it's not used for that. That should be validated before. And producing prototypes, yes, it can be used to develop the prototype system. You're on a borderline there between 5 and 6. And of course, it's as you, the settling on the level you're at is largely down to yourself to define when you get into the area of 4, 5, and 6. So a working prototype is what they're looking for. So you see there again, it's trying to get a good, clever, innovative idea through to commercial application. By the time you get to level 9, of course, it means that you probably have a product or service that would attract commercial funding, private funding anyway. So the question would be asked, do you really need EU support at the top level? So we should really look between 5 and 7, ideally at 6, and that's down to definition if you're going to apply. So the next one, cross-border. Naturally, because the funding has come from the European Union and the accession countries, it must be relevant to all of them, to be fair on the so-called juste retour, how much countries get back from the donation they make to the European Commission. So what's the product or services relevance to Europe? I'll call them products rather than product or service. A service is a product in this sense. So the relevance to Europe, relevance to innovation, jobs, knowledge, what's it actually going to give back to the funding that's being invested? Now, it's best to think of the European Commission as investors in your project. And when you write your proposal and do your presentation, think of them as investors. What attracts them? Why should they put money in? What will they get back? It has to be this commercial approach. They're less influenced by the technology than they are by the likely commercial commercializable result. It's difficult even for an English speaker, commercializable. You've analysed the market, you've made sure there's nothing out there. Now, it has to be said, when we visited companies in the past, what they consider to be a brilliant new idea or innovation can be found on the internet. Someone else is already there. And it's a problem with businesses that they get an idea in their head and they assume two things. One, that nothing like it exists anywhere else in the world, when in fact it may do. And two, that it must be fundable because they've had a good idea. That's not how the world works. So, looking at target markets, looking at competition, and looking at the fit with European goals. Now, this comes into the social agenda in being more inclusive, reducing poverty, raising the health standards, raising security. All of those things will help to get funding. So the next one then, high growth. What do we mean by high growth? It's largely the impression that the evaluators have on how your business has grown and how it may grow if funding is granted. So the OECD, which is well respected, of course, across the world, defines high growth businesses as a firm of 10 or more employees that grows either its employees or its turnover by an average of more than 20% per year for 3 consecutive years. Now, that's a pretty high target. And if you're working during a slowdown in trade, it's even more difficult to get. I would go for less than 10. I don't see 10 as being a limiting factor. In terms of the SME instrument, but you can see that you have to demonstrate a significant increase over a period in order to impress the evaluators. And of course, one of the things they look at is the potential for high growth as a result of the project. In other words, it's going to give a return, a commercial return, if money is invested. So looking at disruptive, this is often bandied about with innovation. So let's just have a quick look at what disruptive innovation is about. Innovation tends to fall into 3 areas. Incremental, which is the one we tend to see most. Small changes which influence market share, the progressive advance of a product and so on. This is the level which companies tend to compete at. You see this in the mobile phone market, extra attributes in there, a better camera, curvy screens, all sorts of things. It's mental. That change is more significant by adding a new technology to give a major market lead. So that's a bigger change. But disruptive, the one that the Commission love to find if they can, it creates new markets and value networks by disrupting the existing ones. So that's a major demand. Just as an example, one that we can all recognize, the camera. For many years, the camera didn't change much. It became smaller. It was mechanical. It used film. And everybody seemed happy with that until you had the incremental changes come along. So they added flash guns and light meters and automatic wind films, and generally improved, disrupt. And then, of course, the step change was the electronic camera, which made it more compact. It meant that you could transfer pictures into your computer, and had built-in light metering, automatic focusing, and flash guns and so forth. But the disruptive innovation, of course, was the mobile phone, which now seems to be more of a camera and an entertainment center, which just happens to take calls. So even the mobile phone now has gone through the incremental and step change stages. The interesting thing there is that not one of the camera companies saw the mobile phone coming along, even though they were quite large corporations like Kodak and so forth. They did buy into mobile phones a lot later in the game, but they didn't see it happening. And this is often the case. The World Wide Web, for instance, nobody saw that coming. And then when you look at the fax machine, they didn't see email coming along. So they are disruptive, and it's worth standing back to see, which direction your technology is taking. So they're looking for the disruptive innovations. They don't always find it, but they're looking really too for a significant step change innovation. Scalable, that means that the company demonstrates an ambition to significantly scale up production. Now, how is that done? It is an ambition, but moving from the final prototype to mass sales, perhaps with their own production or producing under license, joint venture partnerships, and so forth. Now, quite often we see SMEs who've developed very novel products, and you say to them, so if this goes to market, how will it be made? And they say, oh, we'll build a factory. Now, okay, if you have 20, 30 million euros to build a factory, fine. It could be that you have it produced for you, of course. But you have to look at your business and say, well, what are we really? We're an R&D business. We're not a production business in many cases. If that's the case, then selling that product under license or a joint venture will mean that the R&D company then has money to invest in developing other things. So this is where business strategy and business planning really comes in. How do you see your business growing, and which direction should it take? If you are going to go into production, how will you hire the necessary knowledge to build a production capability? And do you really want to be running a production company, or would you rather stay with R&D? So let's look then finally at what's expected of you and your business if you're going to apply for SME Instrument. It's first worth looking internally really at your business, and again this is where business strategy comes in. There's a term often used in Europe, absorptive capacity. How able is your business to take advice on board and take action? The assumption is that you can take action on everything you're told, but this may not be the case. You may be a scientist, when you begin to receive advice and questions about manufacturing or large-scale manufacturing, it could be you don't have that knowledge. And your business may be a science-based business which has difficulty in taking manufacturing on board. So it's worth looking at your own capacity for dealing with these things. If you're going to write a proposal, how well trained are your staff in writing proposals? It's a big job. You can use external help, and I think TÜBİTAK have arrangements for helping on that in developing proposals. It is a skill, it's highly competitive, and it has to be inclusive and cover all of the questions, again I say, that a potential investor may ask. We often see in proposals that people with a scientific background have written the proposals. They write several pages about the science and then a paragraph about the commercial aspects. It's the commercial aspects that the Commission are interested in, and it doesn't show how clever you are scientifically, it shows how little you know commercially. It has the opposite effect. So you need a proper structured proposal writing. They are in English, it's unfortunate, but they are in English, and English has become the common language across the Commission. So how are the language skills? And you need to buy those skills in to polish the proposal. And remember, you will be up against native English speakers, so it's important that this is done correctly. The second thing there is, of course, that if the English is not too good, the wrong things may be said, and indeed the wrong words may be in there. External review, that's always useful. Someone who knows the background to the science, obviously from a non-competitive source, but looking at both the technical proposal and on the structure of the proposal itself and the commercial potential. So it's worth taking in a view externally. This isn't your grandfather or someone, it's someone that actually knows the technology and what's needed in a proposal. And one that we find is often missing: do the management give enough time and priority to doing this? It's seen as, oh, well, we'll apply and see what happens. But if management drive the process, and of course it affects their company in the end, they must devote enough time and importance to it being done properly, otherwise it can be wasting time. What do evaluators look for? They look for, they look at three different areas. Excellence. Does the project have high innovation potential beyond state of the art? Again, we're there with our disruptive technologies. Impact. Does it meet the pressing needs of European and global markets? Again, you can develop the cleverest thing on earth, but if there is no market for it, it's not going to be a commercial success. Of course, with some new technologies, you have to create a market in many ways, but that should be recognized at the beginning rather than at the end, and it should be addressed as to how it's going to be done. And finally, the implementation. Does the project have a coherent and efficient work plan? Of course, to convince the evaluators that you can actually do the job and see it through to success. So a look at some of the companies we have been to, not in person, of course, in confidence, but if you take the proposal, the number one thing is to define the need. What is the need out there? Where is the market gap? How big is that need? How big is that gap? Why is it not served by products and processes which are already out there, product services and processes which are not already out there? If you're convinced there's a need, then the idea should satisfy that need and should demonstrably satisfy that need. So the evaluators, as potential investors, need to see that the idea is workable and it will address this identified market niche. And finally, the process that gets you there is also, of course, checked out. They'd be looking for, if you involve a new process, how will you provide that process? How long will it take? Are there stages in the work plan that will allow you to break or change direction? And all that goes in the proposal. Now, in many cases, the SMEs, the higher technology SMEs in Turkey, have come from university backgrounds. So the university professors and senior fellows already are well versed in the process of research. It's what they've done for all of their career. They know well the process. And they tend to say, there could be funding around, if we set up a company, let's look for an idea that fits with our process. This means that the need is third in line. The process they have, they look for an idea, and then they don't spend much time looking at the need, or they assume the need is there. And again, when we look at the need, you're looking perhaps at a national need. There may be a need within Turkey, but that need may not be that convincing across Europe and the wider world. So it's the reverse. So you see there that there's a conflict in the sense that the Commission are looking for evidence of a need, and it comes well down the list in terms of companies applying. And this has been one of the major issues we've found in looking at use of the SME instrument. So is it for you and your business? The question that we began with. Well, first of all, of course, are you an SME? Do you fit with the description up to 250 employees and 50 million euro turnover? I'm sure you all are, as most companies are in the national economies across Europe. Have you actually commercialized a product before? Now, this gives the evaluator confidence that you can commercialize a product again. So important to demonstrate that you have done this or been involved in this. If you feel a bit weak on this, then you must strengthen how you will commercialize the product that you're using as the focus of your project. So then looking at the project itself, I've just said in the previous slide, what customer market needs will this project solve? And is there evidence? So often we find the need is imagined. That we've had such a clever idea, there must be a need. But you need to look at that. Quite often we hear the line, we're going to market to Europe. Now, Europe consists of 28 member countries, and the first question we have is, which of those countries are you focusing on? Some of those economies are well developed, some are not. Now, the well-developed ones may already have something similar to your product. The less developed ones may be the case. There are many national languages to think about. So if you're, for instance, constructing software, is it easy to translate your software, instructions anyway, into the national languages that you're focusing on? Why have you chosen that market? Is it because it's a nice sunny place, or is it because there's a potential for your project which is greater than anywhere else? So it's not sufficient to say we want to export to Europe or the United States. The United States has many more trade barriers than the EU does, and it's worth looking at those in terms of the requirements for standards, the requirements for setting up businesses there, the funding of those businesses, and so on. So it needs to be explored. Again, if you're talking to an evaluator, can I have €1 million for this, please? The evaluator or investor would want to know these things. What's the market? Are you sure there's a market? How have you looked at this? Where's the evidence? The second thing there is the project highly innovative. We've just gone through that with the disruptive stuff. Describe the thing as disruptive as possible, but again, have proof. We've been to companies where they've said, there is nothing like this. As I said to you, we found it on the web as we've been talking. So important to be realistic. Many researchers, developers see their idea or their project as their baby. Two things, nothing said against this baby, it's the best baby in the world, and they would never sell it to anyone else, it's theirs. They'd never pass it on. So it's important to realise, just how saleable and how achievable it is in terms of its innovation. Is it above the current state of the art? Again, this is looking at how highly innovative it is, and they will need some sort of proof on that. Does it have the potential to disrupt? Not many do, but many are in the step change role and therefore still have a role. And if you're up against other projects, none of which are disruptive, then you'll stand a good chance in winning it for the step change innovation. Some companies say to us, we applied, we got a certain score, we improved it, and we got a lower score. How does that happen? Well, it goes to different evaluators, so there may be a different view, but you're also competing with a different group of people each time. And it may be that the first time around there weren't many competitors, the second time around there were many better competitors, and therefore you were scored lower in comparison. Is it at TRA level 6 or above? As I said, 5 to 7 is roughly the area. And you know what's needed, so write the bid around that definition. Is the management team on board? Quite often they say they are, but are not really backing it. Management have lots of things to do, and they're always worrying about the next month or next 6 months. But this is long-term investment. It's investment in time and, of course, budget to produce a proposal. Intellectual property protection, again, you need either to protect the product or to have a clear strategy of how that will be done if you haven't yet done it. And again, of course, how much time and money is involved in achieving the project. What it's not, it's important to say, it's not an easy option. It's highly competitive, and you do need to demonstrate lots of things to win the funding, because the funding is focused on building new innovative products across Europe. So it's not about research, it's not about initial ideas and so on, as I covered earlier, the lower TRL levels. It's not for companies with no clear strategy or business plan. You need to have a strategy that says, we're going to invest in new products, and we already have this market, we see the new markets as being X, Y, Z, and we have a business plan that takes us there. I always recommend with businesses that they have a 5-year plan, which may be a couple of sheets of paper, but looking forward 5 years, where do you see the business? And then within that, a 1-year plan, which you do at the same time each year, which takes your 5-year plan, looks at what you've planned for the coming year, puts more detail to it, and then adds another year to your 5-year plan. So there's a rolling 5-year plan, and there's always the 1-year plan in place. So you have the long-term and the short-term view of the business. It can change, of course, but at least it gives a pattern to run to. If you're going, for instance, in 5 years' time, you're making plastic moldings, you see yourself molding in a different material for a different market. How do you get there? A business plan in its simplest form is where are we now? Where are we going? How will we get there? So if you're moving into a new area, do you have the people that can do it? Do you have the technical know-how? Do you have the equipment? And if you had all that, where would the market be if you don't have a reputation in that market? It's not for pursuing academic research. Other funding's available for that. And under the Horizon 2020, Pillar 1 is about pursuing academic science, usually on a collaborative basis. Not for companies with no clear market knowledge of customer needs. As I said several times now, you need to know the market and the needs. And from the Commission's perspective, it must be driven by business over technology. The technology is very exciting, it's what gets you there, but the business is what funds it and how you achieve it. So think more about the business and its trading and its strategy, as well as the technology aspects. Quite often, mention technology given a high focus and very little on markets and business. So we're all part of the Turkey and Horizon 2020 project. This is phase 2. It follows on from one that closed just over a year ago. We do provide a range of support alongside our colleagues, TÜBİTAK. We work closely with TÜBİTAK, of course, and the Ministry of Industry and Technology. The project contains several things that can help. It's all provided free of charge. When I say that, of course, it's funded by the European Commission and the Turkish government, so it costs, but it's provided free of charge to users. There's project writing support for 50 applicants who have fallen short of the requirements. So these are people already into the SME Instrument. There's training on project writing, 12 over the next 3 years for 50 participants. Project writing camps, 6 of those for 20 participants, how to write a project, how to improve a project. 9 webinars, of which this is the first. This is ideally focused on companies new to the SME Instrument, hence my extensive explanations early on about the Commission and the instrument. Pitching workshops, people who have to pitch their ideas to the European Commission or to investors, again, training on that. And we'll be helping companies who've had the EC Seal of Excellence. These are projects which have come very close to being funded, but not quite. So we'll be helping 10 of those to hopefully push them over those few extra points and win funding. We'll also have, based on finance, investment readiness training for 30 delegates as well. Now, this is the SME subset of a much larger program. The information is available on our website, and of course through TÜBİTAK and the European Commission. So there's lots of information available. I hope you haven't fallen asleep whilst I've been speaking, and I hope you found it of interest. Thank you for participating, and we'll now deal with lots of questions. Do we have lots of questions? I asked my colleagues. So can we switch over to Yasmin then, who's got some questions?
Nasıl okuyor geri dönebilirim orada? Merhabalar tekrar. Çok soru geldi aslında. Ben konuşurken mümkün olduğunca cevaplamaya çalıştım. Teşekkürler. Şimdi sorulara dönelim isterseniz. Gelen soruların birçok kısmı partnerlerle ilgili sorular vardı. Yani benim fikrimi sorarsanız partner bulmak zorunda değilsiniz. sorry, English, right? I'm sorry, I'm shifting to English. But most of the questions are about having a partner. If it is necessary to have a partner, I believe you don't need a partner, because when we look at the statistics, more than 90% of the successful proposals are single entity proposals. So getting a partner doesn't bring any added value if the partner is not really qualified. And what else? People are asking, I think there are some participants from TTOs, and they are asking how they can support the universities and the academicians in SME instruments. The universities cannot be partners in the SME instrument program, because the first condition is that you have to be an SME to be a partner, but universities can be subcontractors, or the academicians can act as a team member in the SME if they would like to be involved in the project. So for SME instruments team, it's not necessary to only use the company staff. Sometimes we deal with startups who have a couple of personnel, but they can get some consultancy from external consultants, and these are also eligible costs. So if you can match your academicians with the universities, the academicians can provide consultancy and their fees can be compensated under the project budget. There's a question about the technology readiness level. If it is below 6, you are not eligible to apply for SME instruments. And there was a question, one of our SMEs asked about their situation of being an SME. They have a shareholder from Netherlands, and this company, the shareholder company, is a big company, and this big company has 50% share. So if you have a shareholder which has more than 25 of your shares, then the employees and the turnover of the shareholder company also is very important, because it may affect your SME status. That's why if you are interested in applying to SME instrument, and if you have a shareholder which has more than 25% of the shares, I think you should confirm your status of being an SME or not. There's a question about the national funds. They are asking if it is necessary to have received any national grant earlier before applying to European Commission. No, it's not necessary. Actually, in most European Union countries, there are no national funds. Actually, that's why some countries like Spain, Italy, Germany are applying so much to the SME instrument program, because there is no alternative. So you don't have to benefit from national funds before European Commission. There is no such restriction. And about the budget, there was a question. This program, the funding rate is 70% of the direct costs plus 25% of indirect costs. So what are direct costs and indirect costs? Direct costs are costs that are mainly made for the project. For example, if 10 people are working for your project for the whole duration, just only for the project, then you can include these personnel costs as direct cost, as travel, equipment, promotional materials. Any cost that is made for the project is considered as direct cost. What are indirect costs? Sometimes you may have some costs that you cannot provide any proofs, or you cannot really differentiate which part of this cost is related to the project. For example, the rent or other services that you use both for your company and for this project and for other projects. So the European Commission is providing this 25% extra money to you. When you claim your direct costs, you have to provide invoices or other expenditure proof documents, but for indirect costs, you don't need to provide any proof documents. So actually, the funding rate in the SME instrument is more than 70%. I think it's more than 80%, between 80 and 90% if you consider the indirect costs as well. These are the questions I got, so is it enough or? Mm.
Is there an updated guide as a question? I don't know whether TÜBİTAK have an updated guide. We have a guide as part of the project. I suppose in a way the only update was the fact that you went before a panel of evaluators, which I explained earlier. It's been the same SME instrument for all of its life, I think. So there are guides. There are, if you look on the web at the Europa website, the Horizon 2020 website, the Commission has extensive guides on writing proposals. There's also the EIC. They have the national contact points. Shema and Burek will give you correct guidance if you need it on things. But I would suggest the first thing is to research it on the web, as you would with many things, and look at what's available there. Then, if you have any specific questions, to put those to TÜBİTAK through email, I guess is the best route. I'm just looking at some of the questions coming in, lots of questions. All of these questions, by the way, will be answered directly to you, and we'll also put them on the website afterwards, probably grouped into a series of questions because some are very similar. There's one here, can a project proposal for a new product, sorry, I'm trying to read through it, for a newly established SME with a high financial need for new companies. As I said, we're looking at technology readiness level 5 to 7, 6 ideally. And that wouldn't fit with that, would it? It's more the basic idea and so forth. There may be national funding available for that, and you may be able to join in a collaborative project under Pillar 1, but not really SME Instrument on that one. Is there a minimum financial capacity to be proved to apply for phase 1? No, in terms of a number, it's only an upper limit, but the evaluators will be looking for a credible business that's been running for some time and is able to afford to undertake the project that you're proposing, obviously with European funding included, but they're looking for a viable business because otherwise they would tend to put the funding with businesses that were viable. So it's not saying your business is not viable, it's just saying that some are more viable and therefore stand a better chance of getting a product to market. Again, it's the decision that will be made by a financial person if you were pitching to them. So I've said look at them as investors in the business and identify any weaknesses. My colleagues in there with any more questions?
Trying to respond from here. As for the fund rate in phase 1, it's a lump sum amount. So there is actually there is no meaning thinking as 100% or something. But for SMEs, the funding rate for the Commission side, it's 70% for innovation actions. So as for to get it like this, you write around 71,000 or something. So they will give you 50,000, but it's a fixed number. It doesn't change for phase 1. There were one question. Let me see.
There's one here on suppose we receive seed capital funding from TÜBİTAK
Yes.
for our project. However, we've not managed to commercialise
Product yet. Would you recommend us to apply from SMEI? Yes. If it says, if you assess it to be at technology readiness level 6 or above, that's the important thing. But yes, it's a natural progression. And I think I'm correct in saying a lot of the focus within Turkey is to build the innovation capability of the country, which I think, looking from an external perspective, the country has done extremely well with some excellent science parks and excellent businesses in there, the SME instrument is to commercialize that science, and the focus perhaps within Turkey may move towards the view that says, well, we've developed all this innovation and these clever ideas and products. How can we now help to commercialize them? Because it's only when they're commercialized in the market, earning money, do you get the jobs and the return in taxation and other things. So that's when it begins to benefit the economy, which has paid for it. So it's a natural progression. And one I've seen in lots of other countries. The UK, for instance, now is very light on funding because the market itself should pay for it. If it's a good idea, the view is you should be able to win funding from a commercial source. And of course, in the United States, it's an industry. The whole intellectual property sector, there are companies with lots of cash seeking to invest in these things because obviously they're looking for the next Apple or the next Google, whatever. Remember too, some of those big famous names, Apple, Google, Amazon, have all been founded as SMEs and have become global businesses. I think Amazon is the largest in the world within the lifetime of the founder. So it is possible to do this. And of course, a point I always make, every business began as an SME. Whether it's Boeing or someone else, they were all founded as SMEs to begin with. Any more?
There's a question here. Where are the interviews held? All of them are held in Brussels. For that one, we have an advice for you. Generally, they are expecting in the CEO level of company participants, to attend these interviews, because mostly questions are about how they will be commercialized for the project. So a technical from the team, a technical person would not be enough to answer all these questions. So we generally offer for the CEOs to attend the interviews.
We're reading questions
And answering at the same time, so.
Yeah.
Where are the interviews held is one question. The interviews are held in Brussels. And it's important. Thank you for raising that, Mustafa. When that presentation goes ahead, the evaluators, of course, are looking as if they were investors. So if you send a purely technical team to do a technical presentation, you'll fail, quite frankly. You have to look at it from the commercial perspective. You're trying to sell the idea that your product or service is innovative, has a market, and that you as a business can do it, can get there. Now, remember I said they're also looking for the wow factor, and it's important that you make that impact to begin with. You have up to 30 minutes to present. So going into long technical details with people who may not know your technology, may not have an interest in your technology, or may not be technologists, is not a good idea. So you have to assure them that you do know the technology, but not bore them to death with it, and concentrate more on the commercial aspects. If you remember, I said that if you put too much science and technology in, rather than impressing them how clever you are, they're impressed by the fact you don't know much about the other parts, such as commercialization and the process. So a balance is right, but think of it as pitching to investors, because after all, that's what they are. Now, just one other point, the difference between pitching to the EC and pitching to a panel of financial investors. The EC are looking for the world-beating innovation, whereas the financial investors are looking at the fastest route to getting their money back big time. So they have a different perspective. So the financial people would be looking more for the fact, they'd be looking for comfort that the innovation will work and has a market and has a potential good return. The commission's slightly different. They're looking for something that will improve the chances of Europe overall, European economies overall, in some groundbreaking disruptive technology, so slightly different. And we have indeed 2 courses on that topic divided that way. One is pitching to the European Commission and one is pitching to potential investors. Over to my colleagues. Do we have any more questions coming through? Pathfinder, Yasmin?
No.
No, not really. Or TÜBİTAK, Pathfinder?
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Welcome, Burak. Hi.
Thank you.
So the question is, do you have more information about Pathfinder?
Yes, I can answer.
Okay, please do. Yeah.
Actually, the Pathfinder is not like the phase 1 type. It also includes other opportunities like Fed Open and other low TRL projects. So SMEs, especially, tend to be in the access to the other, not in the Pathfinder part, but the later part, which comprises the phase 2 parts. And in the Pathfinder part, you should not compare it with the phase 1. Phase 1 will be closed in September, and I think SMEs should be in the later program accelerator part. Yeah.
Okay. One there in Turkish, Zeynep. Could you deal with the one from Zeynep there in Turkish, perhaps?
Türkçe hangisi?
Aşağıda bir tane Türkçe soru geldi.
Okay, well, there's still 2 of us online, so yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Evet. Ben cevap verebilirim. Zeynep Hanım'ın sorusu var. I can answer. SME aracı için sözlü olarak sunumda mı yapmalıyız? Tabii ki SME aracı faz 2 projelerinde sözlü olarak eğer ilk birkaç aşamayı geçmeniz lazım. En sonunda sizi mülakata alacaklar. O mülakatta sizden bir sunum değil de soruları cevaplamanız istenecektir. Bu şekilde devam edecektir. Diğer sorunuzda KOBİ aracı için eğitimleriniz var sanırım. Ücretleri nelerdir? TÜBİTAK tarafından yapılan hiçbir eğitimde ücret alınmamaktadır. Doğrudan ücretsiz bir şekilde verilmektedir. Burada yani ücretli olarak bir programımız bulunmamaktadır. Burada davetiye usulü olarak çağrılmaktadır. Bu davetiyeyi de işte belli başlı faz 2'de daha önce geçmiş iyi projelere sahiplerine ve faz 1 kapsamında başarılı olmuş kişilere yönlendirmeye çalışıyoruz. Ama davetiye listesi için net bir durum yok daha. Ve önümüzdeki eğitimlerde kişiler davet edilecektir doğrudan.
A couple more though, whilst you're on, Burak, which I'm sure you can answer. Does TÜBİTAK offer travel support for the interviews in Brussels? And is there a special grant or support by TÜBİTAK for proposal writing for phase 1?
Yes, we have this, support scheme for phase 1 projects, but there's only one cutoff for phase 1, so just one chance for the remaining parts. But we have one opportunity for phase 1 case.
And when is that?
And there is one other question: Will you do Turkish webinar?
Okay.
I don't know. We are still discussing about it, but I think we will do. Okay. And
yes, please.
Pathfinder dediğiniz nedir? There is Turkish question. Pathfinder kısmını faz 1 ile karıştırmamak lazım. Faz 1 artık iptal olacak. Pathfinder kısmında çok değişik çağrılar içerecek. Düşük TRL dediğimiz yani biraz daha akademiye yönelik çağrılarda burada yer alma durumu var. Yani bu kısımda KOBİ'lerin değil yani KOBİ'lerin değil de daha çok KOBİ'leri biz bir sonraki kısımdaki ilişkiye vermemiz daha doğru olacaktır. Ya Pathfinder kısmında çok KOBİ'lerle ilgili bir husus olacağını zannetmiyorum.
Okay, thanks. And one there that we had asked, is there support for companies to go to Brussels for the presentations? TÜBİTAK provides support.
Actually, not to think about it, but I think we will discuss it. We can give. I hope we can give a lot for this because we want companies to visit Brussels for this reason.
Yeah. Okay. The project too will have a brokerage meeting in Brussels later this year, and there will be assistance to take companies to Brussels to meet potential partners. This is on the larger part, if you like, of the Horizon 2020 project, and it's aimed at those companies seeking to partner with other European organisations on collaborative projects. That does include SMEs that fit with that description. So again, our website will carry the details as the dates are finalised.
Yes.
There's Yasmin back again. Nice to see you. The technology defeats us sometimes, but not for long. So any more questions on, let's see, like still coming in. Again, I repeat that we shall be answering all these questions directly and putting them on our website so that people can see them. And there is a recording of this webinar, which will be made available on the website as well. So you can go back over some of the points. The presentation I used will also be there. So lots of information arising from the webinar. So from Ajar, would you see a point or value in using EU-based consulting companies to apply for phase one? There are a lot of people out there doing this, and some are good, some are not as good. I think probably the best way, TÜBİTAK, I think, have a list of consultants that they know. So the first point may be to ask them. It's a difficult one because those consultants do have the knowledge to construct a proposal. But what I would say there is that it isn't a matter of saying we need to propose SME Instrument over to you. Do as a proposal, send it in, because it's not going to happen. And this is the reason that they introduced the interviews. You can have a very polished proposal that's done for you with not much involvement from yourself, and consultants will be very happy to do that. But when it comes to the presentation, you're not sure of the product, you can't answer questions about the innovation, or you don't even have the language skills to do the presentation and the interview, you'll come unstuck. And we've seen one or two companies where this has happened. Very polished proposal, but they asked to see the principles of the company at those presentations. And unless you've been heavily involved, convinced you're a champion for your project, you'll come unstuck at that point. So I would say be very careful, manage the process and make sure you're engaged and that you actually manage the consultant doing the work. And if they're good consultants, they'll be very happy to do that because they know that's how they can best achieve success, by engaging you in the process. Okay, any more on there? Will you do a Turkish webinar? I won't. Or it would be a very short one consisting of about 20 words that I picked up. The reason it's in English, and it said it in your invitation, is that you have to submit your proposal in English. That's the language that the Commission asks it for. So if you don't have the language, I mean, you're able to ask questions, obviously, in Turkish, and Yasmin opened the meeting in Turkish, and I can appreciate it's a problem. But ask away in Turkish if you wish now, by all means. But we have to get the message over in English, and some of the terminology doesn't fit with Turkish, and the language, unfortunately, in the case of anyone who doesn't speak English, is that that's the language the Commission insists upon. So if you don't have the capacity, then get help, is all I can say. But at the moment, ask in Turkish because I'm outnumbered. So happy for my colleagues to deal with questions in Turkish. Looking down here, there's a question there about which portal. Not sure what that one's about. Again, some of your questions need further investigation to sort out how we can best answer it. What are the most important points while applying or writing the project for the SME Instrument? Now, I did go over some of those quite briefly. There's a lot in there. I would suggest that you look at the guides that the Commission itself offers guides. Of course, the Commission doesn't want to waste the time of businesses and their officials and evaluators by having badly constructed and composed proposals. So there's a lot of guidance out there on what should be in the proposal. It's a very structured proposal application, and it has sections that you have to fill in. A fairly standard thing, a fairly short thing for the phase one, but it's the interpretation that matters, and this is where external help comes in, and help from, I say external, I include TÜBİTAK in that. A lot of companies look for a proposal, a successful proposal that they can cut and paste their name and company into and then apply. It doesn't work that way. It has to be developed. And some of the things I've covered are very tough things to cover. The market share, the level of innovation, how you will manage the process. And I think it's true to say you have to be organized as a business before you can begin to expect success on the SME Instrument. It's tough, but if you go through that process, you're also improving the efficiency and viability of your own business. So a business strategy and planning exercise is good for the business anyway, and of course will help with the proposal. Another question from Ajar, he's very busy this morning. As an insider, would you suggest I apply for phase one directly or wait for Pathfinder program instead? It depends where you are in terms of the development of your product. If it's got to the stages we talked about, the TRL level 6, and you think it's viable and you know information on markets, then go for SME Instrument, because you know you may be successful in that, and there may also be an opportunity under Pathfinder. So I wouldn't wait. I would go for it if you have what's needed to make a good application. Okay, we have 20 questions waiting, so we still have lots to answer. We have to close at 12, but we'll be open for questions for you to send in for 30 minutes after 12 o'clock. And again, I say we'll deal with those questions offline and directly. What are the most important points while applying or writing the project for the instrument? I think we just covered that one. So that was the same question, I think, that Ajar asked. What was the difference between phase one and Pathfinder? I don't think it's quite clear yet. I think all we have to say is on that SMEs, as I mentioned, are vital to the economies of all European countries, and a lot of the funding will be focused on SMEs, even if it's called something different. It will be there. So, you know, I think Pathfinder will be very similar. I don't know whether you have anything to add on that, Burak. You may know what have you seen differences yet between the SME Instrument and Pathfinder, or are we still waiting to find the detail? I have to say, of course, TÜBİTAK as the national representatives are closer to what's happening in the Commission than we as outsiders. So TÜBİTAK may know more than we do at present.
Okay. Actually, yeah, there's a big difference between SME Instrument and Pathfinder, because Pathfinder now is completely comprised of Pet Open projects, which in Pet Open is for the groundbreaking problems like social problems, but not for SME case, like it's in academic case or research center case. Yeah, and the TRL level is not for the like at the market level. So it's in low levels, like the ideal level, like TRL 1, 2, 3. So we cannot say an SME to just invest on or make a project on a Pathfinder project. But for SMEs, the later one, in EIC work program, the accelerator instrument will be very, very suitable for an SME to apply. So we will work on the EIC case for the later presentations. Okay. And Türkçe olarak da açıklamak gerekirse faz 1 ile lütfen Pathfinder kısmını karıştırmayın. Pathfinder kısmı tamamen akademiye yönelik ve bu akademiye yönelik olmasının nedeni de şu: akademide bazı fikirler, hani çok riskli bulunan fikirlerin desteklenmesi isteniyor. Bununla ilgili bir bütçe ayrılması söz konusu. Bu fikirler içinde doğrudan ticaretleşmeye yönelik olmayabilir bu fikirler ve herhangi bir KOBİ'nin gidip de bu fikre hem yatırım yapması hem de bununla ilgili bir programda destek bulması kolay değil. O yüzden genelde üniversite seviyesinde veya araştırma merkezi seviyesinde yürütülecek programlar bunlar. Ve SME'ler için çok uygun olmayabilir. Ama tabii SME'den kişiler de başvurabiliyor bu konuda, ama kabul oranı düşük olabilir bir SME'nin başvurusunda. Bunu vurgulamak isterim. Evet, başka soru olursa?
There's one more question, Onur Bey. Does clarification
Of legal
issues
like crime fall into the scope of phase 1, or should we have dealt with it before applying? EU is very sensitive about legal issues like privacy. You know, since May 2018, there is a particular law called GDPR. So I think you have to clarify all these issues before you apply to phase 1 or phase 2 or any other European Union program.
How can we understand that our project will be eligible for SME Instrument? As I said, I went through some of that, so rereading the proposal might be useful, but there's a huge amount on the Horizon and European website on eligibility. The eligibility criteria are quite simple: less than 250 employees and less than 50 million euro turnover. Usually the turnover thing isn't relevant. But more importantly, it's what you're proposing, whether you've looked at markets, the innovation level. This is where it's not eligibility, but it's likelihood of it succeeding. The TRL level 6 is a requirement. It's more about the appropriateness of your project and how well you have researched and constructed it. Okay. So, do we have any more questions? It looks as though we may have reached the end of our questions. Lots of very interesting questions there, which I thank my colleagues for dealing with. It's not easy wrestling with technology, being given instant questions and expecting instant answers, but hopefully they have been useful to you all. Do we have final chance for questions? And otherwise, we'll close the webinar. So we'll wait a few minutes, see if any more come through. And it looks as though we don't have any more. Oh, right, okay. Okay, fine. Yeah, fire away.
Do you think development software about business excellence can be eligible? I'm not sure if I got the question right, but software development projects are eligible, and they can get the grant, you know, if it is including good algorithms. But if it is just a simple matching platform, it may get the low grade in terms of excellence.
I could add to that. The software may well be marketable in its own right. The EU funding is about taking something, as I've said so many times this morning, something which is groundbreaking and different, Now, one of the project winners was software to do with finding local hotel rooms, for instance, which was used for mobile devices. That was seen as novel because it was related to that device and where you were. So it linked availability to your geographic location. It was seen as novel, innovative. So if your business software about excellence, I presume, has got something new about it, and you see it as disruptive and has an advantage over other software, it will be of interest to them. If it's simply a software tool that has a commercial potential among others, then you should be looking at commercial funding to sell that product in the marketplace. The development element is very important. Any more questions? Did the panel have any questions? Well, we assume that everything is clear now, and that we have roughly 100 people who are online at the moment who are going to consider SME Instrument. I refer you again to the websites, which I showed earlier and are in the presentation, and hope that we see some of you, and that you may join us for our next webinar, which will be about innovation. We'll contact you about that as it approaches. It's towards the end of the summer. But meanwhile, look at the EU websites, look at our website, look at the TÜBİTAK website, and make sure you're fully versed in this. And we wish you every success. So I'd like to thank the panel for participating this morning, for our technologists who've been running around with bits of wire and things to make it all work. I've enjoyed speaking to you. It would be nice to speak to you directly, but hopefully we'll have that opportunity in future. So thank you very much, and goodbye.
Bye.